guest is a researcher, medical intuitive astrologist. She's an internationally acclaimed speaker who has presented her work worldwide. She is the great-granddaughter of President Dwight David Eisenhower. She is considered a leading researcher and expert on health, exopolitics, alchemy, metaphysics, astrology, and galactic history. Let's welcome today's guest, Laura Eisenhower. Welcome, Laura.
Hey, Adam, thanks for having me.
Yeah, very interesting. I've been very I've delved into the work of various areas of the metaphysical in terms of finding my path as a phys ed teacher for 30 years, and then after having a specific type of spiritual breakthrough of going down the rabbit hole of trying to find information, and once I found one thing, it led to another thing that just opened up my whole world to the questions that we all ask once we're on this path. And you're somebody who's inspiring, who has investigated and has the DNA of questioning and going beyond what exists. Maybe you could just give the audience a little bit of a background in terms of how you came to this path and doing the work that you do.
Yeah, it just kind of hit me at a pretty young age. I just felt like I was being prepared for this particular window period, and Eisenhower's presence was very close to me. And I've come to understand through the help of remote viewers and people that really dig deep into just the psychic realms, which I've done myself, that we've worked together. I was helping him during his administration, so we had some sort of agreement me coming into this family, and it was actually briefed to him, and that has been told to me by people that have insights into all this because of their positions. And if anybody's heard my story, I got recruited to go off planet in 2006. So it all kind of ties into why I was being prepared at such a young age, because there was pre-targeting before I was born. So I could feel some kind of attention on me, and I was really trying to counteract it, just connecting into higher dimensional energies. I had very interesting dreams and lots of downloads, and I just had to figure out a lot really, really quick. Because he was briefed, they were able to pre-target me before birth because they knew I was coming, and they were just, they used looking glass technologies. And so, I had to kind of process a lot at a pretty young age. The metaphysical part, things like astrology and the kind of work that I do with that, came over the course of my life. It really helped me to understand myself and others better. And I just feel like it's such a lost science. And a lot of it that one hears about is just such a small piece of it. Like when you just get your horoscope or think about certain aspects here and there. I mean, to know a person's birth chart or your own and the progressions and transits can be so helpful in breaking people from any kind of autopilot or any kind of indoctrination or any sort of ancestral patterning. And it really helps, with health issues, because it brings attention to self-knowledge. And that's what I've always been focused in on, is understanding myself and being true to that. So it's been just a lifelong thing that has gone through different phases. I've gone through phases where I felt incredibly lost and just like, what is going on here? Really feeling into the mission, not able to communicate it to anybody. But since I became a public person and met so many other people at events, and just, it's so much different now than it was then. Now we've all kind of found each other, right? So.
Yeah, it's interesting. Usually, when there's a black sheep of the family, a person whose ideas clash with the ideas of a family itself, there's always an opposition that creates a sense of friction that actually helps the soul evolve. And I was wondering if you experienced any of that in your immediate family, even though you had this connection with your grandfather and this pre-birth plan.
Right. Yeah. And his great-grandfather.
Great-grandfather.
I was actually close with his son, my granddad, John S.D. Eisenhower. And there was a lot of close family relations, really, really incredibly loving family. I think some people think Eisenhower is one of the 13 families because he was president, but that really began to happen after his administration, after Project Paperclip, after the 3-letter organizations were beginning to groom particular, individuals to be in these leadership positions, which he tried to warn us about. So it was very humble and hardworking family. the descendants, or excuse me, like on a more ancestral level, the Eisenhower family is connected to the Mennonites and just living very close to the earth. And he grew up as a farmer. And so, that's still kind of carried through. Everybody works really, really hard. Everybody's incredibly loving, but I was the black sheep because I always wanted to talk about these other topics. And I really feel like it skipped a generation. My mom and my aunts and uncle, they just weren't bringing any of this forward. They haven't brought any of it forward in the world, but they've written some amazing books. Like my uncle David's written books about the war, really big books. And my mom's written a few books, and other family members. So they covered a really like important piece. This just happens to be my piece. And I feel like it had to skip a generation because this is a much safer time to be exposing all of this. First of all, it's a ascension window period, which to me really means advancement of the human through unlocking dormant strands of DNA, beginning to connect to our galactic chakras in a much, much bigger picture, really kind of waking up to the inverted matrix and a lot of the dark agendas that have been going on and all the research that so many have uncovered. That's really key to like staying on that trajectory. So I was always talking about this out there stuff, and I tended to get interrupted quite a bit, but with a very loving smile, like, okay, let's talk about something else. Because if I was talking about Valthor or UFOs or ETs, ET government treaties, I was trying to get to the bottom of things, my family was not really going to tell me much. And I think maybe some of them did know, but they didn't want to overwhelm us, or there was just no access to this information. Eisenhower, I really feel, knew to do a lot of things without saying too much, because it had to be sort of hush hush. Because in 1952, there was an unconditional surrender agreement. And I won't get into detail. I don't want to have your channel flagged, but there was a surrender to the dark side under Truman, and MJ-12 ended up signing these things behind his back, and they put the blame on him. So what he did with the help of Valthor was set up things like the Earth Alliance and the White Hats and positive branches of this military, like the USMC Special Section. So if they had known that, if that had come out, it would have been very like difficult. And that's why I feel like it skipped a generation. There must have been a lot of awareness about certain things going on, but there was so much sort of scandalous false narratives being overlaid on these things that I think because of what had happened, and it wasn't written in the history books, he didn't want to freak everybody out and had to kind of work this in a more covert way, because nobody hears about any of this. We don't even hear about paperclip. And what people believe is that we won the Second World War. So to say that we hadn't, I think, was part of the advice that Valthor gave him, because that's who he worked directly with. And it was sort of like, okay, with the help of Valthor, we can set these things up. And then in this particular window, those things will be a lot more active. A lot of these operations will have been taking place. And even the USMC, which is the United States Marine Corps Special Section, that is a positive branch of the secret space program. He signed an executive order saying that this stuff could start to be exposed at around this time. And I think the advice was because this was a much safer window, a lot more people would be speaking out. And even though there's censorship and all sorts of like tactics to smear and shut down, individuals bringing to light a lot of these truths, the threat isn't as great as it used to be, even though it's still pretty sketchy, right?
Yeah.
It's just now they're just trying to just target people's consciousness. After the Second World War, it really became a war on consciousness, geoengineering, all these different agendas to just really link us in and assimilate us into AI. And that would really win the war, because all these mind control operations came in after the Second World War, which is what we've been, dealing with more than anything, this mass indoctrination. So that wasn't the generation to talk about it. And it clearly was like up to me to shed light on these aspects of his administration. And so that's what I've been doing, just diving into these rabbit holes my whole life and trying to get to the bottom of things.
Yeah.
And so I have a book coming out, and I expose everything that I've learned. And it's really, up to the reader to discern and see what you take away from it.
Yeah, I was interested in terms of Project Paperclip, in terms of the Nazis that came here to America after the war, and their role that they played together. Perhaps maybe you can clarify this with the military-industrial complex, or they were the military-industrial complex themselves, working hand in hand with one another. Uh, because many people are not familiar that after the war, the Nazis that did come over here were given a leniency of actually freedom to create, I guess, their own space in their own little environment. And maybe you could pick up on that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, the OSS, Office of Strategic Studies, I believe that's the acronym, whitewashed all the names. So under Truman's administration, you have all this stuff coming in, and he wasn't fully aware of it. So this is really when the shadow government began to like grow, and the many levels of the secret space programs, with the lowest level here on the Earth level being the military industrial complex, the interplanetary corporate conglomerate, and how scientists and doctors and those that were brought over, Nazis, were placed in all these different, positions, universities, medical industry, like all the different power structures to gradually infiltrate. And with different MK Ultra projects and things like Monarch programming, they could put influential people in certain positions that would be undetectable because they would run different altars that could be triggered to change at any time. We see all these like leaders, and we wonder why what might have sounded sincere isn't so much sincere anymore. They're not doing what they said. They seem to be flipping or pushing a narrative that is a false narrative that people are buying into. A lot of the false movements, a lot of the globalist agendas are basically trying to steer humanity in a certain direction that they'll consent to, while it's really obvious that our weather is being manipulated, our food's being manipulated, this pandemic, like all these different things, like get lost to people. So this infiltration has spread its tentacles all throughout the world. And this is basically the New World Order agenda, and the roots of it go back to like Anunnaki, the final cataclysm of Atlantis, and just this covert like the families and banksters, and how they fund both sides of war, and just how they engineer so much, and with their relations with negative aliens, how they use dark technology to manipulate the planetary grid network as well, which changes the trajectory of humanity, putting us on an artificial timeline. But that's an overlay, right? So when we dig through that, when we unwind from that, when we break through that, then we're on the real trajectory. We're actually doing grid work. We're help clearing the fields multidimensionally, as well as on the physical plane, because the chakras and earth grids are a replica of our own DNA and our own chakras. So if we're on an artificial timeline and those timelines have been messed with, this is what's kept our junk DNA alive. When we break through that, when we move through those fences and seals and break all that down, we begin to connect with the true organic ascension timeline, which is the natural advancements of humans through all these different cycles of history, learning and remembering, who they really are, who we really are, beyond the amnesia, because that's what's been the most leveraged against us. And so, we go to school, we don't get any of this in our school books, and people are just regurgitating things that they learn. A lot of people do amazing things regardless, of course, but there is that whole like reward system. And once you join these fields, it's very easy to get compromised when they're throwing the next psyop and wanting the compliance of those that have educated themselves to be like a doctor or a teacher. And that's what we're really seeing to the extreme today. Yeah. And so that really, to me, is the military industrial complex that has infiltrated everything. And it's not just about the funding of war, although that was a major definition of it back in the time of the speech, right? Yes. But when we actually look at the many layers of it, it's so much bigger than we can imagine.
Yeah. You mentioned before, a little bit earlier, before you in terms of the connection you had with your great grandfather on I guess on a galactic somewhat connection from your own being. Could you get into that a little bit more and clarify that, and like maybe illustrate like really what the connection was and how that came about?
Yes. Well, I mean, a lot of it is intuitive. A lot of it I just understood at a really young age, and a lot of information has come through people. And I'm very careful and discerning. I'm not just going to believe everything I hear, but I have a pretty good BS meter within myself, because I just I just know that there's a lot of trickery, right? Or false channels, or
Yes.
but I mean, the sources that it's come from, the common thread has all been the same. Like, I did go to a clairvoyant institute, and I didn't really plan on it. I just kind of bumped into it. I was going to go to an herbal school in California, but they didn't have enough applicants. And the minute I walked in the door, it was just they were having a psychic fair. Nobody knew my name or who I was, and I wasn't even carrying the Eisenhower last name then. I meditated on it, and it felt important because of the mission. Anyway, I walked in the room, and they said Eisenhower's just walked in the room. Like, Eisenhower's here. And they said, he's walking with me, and he's my spirit guide, and he's been working with me, and we've been working together for a really long time. And a few have said, just in separate readings without even talking to each other, that I was his guide in a past life, during the Eisenhower administration, of course, Second World War into the presidency. And I was a part of the star beings that were assisting and advising him. And I did have a connection with Valthor, and we had some sort of agreement to come in. The remote viewer said that I assisted him from the beginning, like when he was born. And then there was an agreement that I would come in because history would be rewritten, and there would be a lot that would be covering up so much, that we had an agreement that I would help sort out the timeline and bring more balance to the timeline, and help bring out a lot of information that's being suppressed, and also where history is being rewritten, that I would get to the bottom of things and bring out the truth. And so that was known, and that's why it was intercepted, because it just got out that that would happen. So there's things written in books too, like this one book this woman gave me, because Eisenhower helped this particular group of star beings. The guardian said that we'll, bring somebody into your family that will, like, help not just with the ancestral stuff, but how that translates to assisting the world. And he petitioned to the guardians through the help of Valthor, appealing to them that humanity needed assistance and that we are worth saving. But because nothing's going to come in and save the day, it's very much about a knowledgeable and aware citizenry, which he said in the speech. So a mission like mine, and a migration of many souls that have come in doing similar work, so we're all like a team down here. We're really trying to wake people up. We're not trying to be in control. We're not into the hierarchical system. It's very much about this migration of souls, including, myself, that had an agreement with him to come into this family to help bring about, like, this awakening. Because it's going to happen anyway, but we have to be conduits of it. If we're not in alignment with it, we can easily be steered off course. So anyway, there's a connection with me and Valthor, and some assistance that I had given him in that time. And then the roles have kind of been switched, where he would help me in this particular window to just really stay strong in that connection. And so some channels have said that he just sends me impulses to my higher self, which is what I used to do for him, and we just kind of work together. And that familiarity is so strong, and that familiarity is very strong, and it's been very hard to be grounded in this physical plane. And I just know that, just like a lot of us, we've been other places. We make strong agreements to come in. Some people are representative of a particular council or star system. And mine, I mean, I've been kind of all over from what I've heard, but I did have a strong Venus lifetime, and was close to Valthor then. And so she helped me to understand my relationship with Val, and a lot of messages have come through Val to me. And I'm getting more contact now with him. It's like the time is now to have more of a relationship with him. And him and Eisenhower work very close together. So it's really hard to kind of articulate, because I've heard so many things over the course of my life, but that's the most recent.
For the people who are not familiar who Valthor is, maybe you could just clarify that.
Oh, yeah. So Valthor is from Venus, and he actually came in 1952 to warn the Truman administration and the Eisenhower, like, as it began to move into the Eisenhower administration, about the Greys and the Nordics. And when we hear about the particular narratives being steered in the disclosure community, we hear about first contact with the Nordics that was turned down. And the Nordics are the ones that warned about the Greys. And then a deal was signed and they blame Eisenhower for it. And the information that I've gotten from the senior advisor to the Earth Alliance, who knows all of this stuff, and Elena Denon and Alex Collier and a lot of individuals and researchers, have clarified that it was MJ12 that signed it behind his back. And Dan Cooper from the Earth Alliance, senior advisor, who has unbelievable credentials, and him and I have been in touch for the last 2 years. He said that the Nordics were not on our side, and neither were the Greys, and it was Val Thor that gave the warning. So Val Thor has been around for a while in his relationship with Eisenhower during that time. And then what we hear about from Frank Strange's in the book Stranger from the Pentagon is that he was put on VIP status for 3 years, and that he advised the Eisenhower administration. And when they really presented it to the Joint Chiefs of Staff and those individuals that have infiltrated or had infiltrated that would be called the shadow government, they didn't allow that administration to go forward with what Val Thor was proposing. So Eisenhower and Val Thor stayed in touch. Victor 1, which is the ship he came in, stayed close, and a bunch of motherships supposedly have surrounded the planet. So he still is assisting, but can't really do it through the governments. That's why we don't want to rely on governments for disclosure. There might be some that will bring it about to a certain degree, but it really has to come from the people. Because when in that speech, which I feel Val Thor had a lot of a say in, or in helping Eisenhower to write, is a knowledgeable and aware citizenry. It's not like the more we wait for something outside of ourselves, the more we're going to be easily played by the problem, reaction, solution, because of all the different events that are happening to kind of, with stepping stones, put us in this like predicament of, wow, okay, they know that people are waiting on disclosure. It's no secret that people have been reporting UFO sightings and that there have been massive abductions. So they know that there's going to have to be a period of some kind of disclosure. Is that disclosure going to be legit? Is it going to be based in these false narratives? Are they grooming humanity to be prepared for, a fake alien invasion where a positive group comes in and tries to save the day? It's like, there are benevolent beings, but there are ones that look like that are cloaked with holographic technology that actually are a part of the Draco Alliance. So if we don't get to the bottom of what's really happened, it'll be really easy to be duped. So it's been hard to just convince people that a lot of these events that have taken place have been psyops, no matter how obvious they are. People still believe in the 9/11 narrative, right? So, it's just been one event after another, all these different fear tactics. And what they do is they target the massive growth periods that would naturally happen based in the cosmic intelligence and the planetary alignments. That's when they know to like throw a big psyop. And so we're seeing that in the disclosure community and even the new age community or whatever. There's all these distortions. And so one has to just really have a lot of discernment and really focus on developing intuition. So a knowledgeable and aware citizenry is basically the Great Awakening. Like, we have to wake up. We have to be able to see through this. It's like somebody's not going to save us from a toxic or abusive ex. They can warn us. They can see the red flags and try and tell us, but it's ultimately up to us to break the ties and move on to what we really deserve, which is true love. And to me, that's the micro of the macro. Relationships are targeted, families are targeted, unity consciousness is targeted. We're being pit against each other, the divide and conquer, the different world wars, now the war on consciousness. It's like, this is what we need to wake up to. And he cryptically said a lot in his final speech, but it's very much not. There's a lot of falsified documents, and all this rewritten history has been very, very damaging. So that's what I'm trying to sort out. And I know a lot of people are too, but it's not an easy one.
Yep. I mean, as an earth creature on this earth itself, and in terms of being influenced by the matrix, by the media, by the propaganda, and the things that you mentioned in a whole big conglomerate of information, it takes courage within, but it also takes, as I said earlier, the friction to be able to expand one's consciousness, to be able to break the barrier that one has in terms of the way that one person is raised in a family. People sometimes don't question, but then there comes that child who who's born that is the person who then sets things differently and has a more difficult time. I myself had that particular background in myself in my house. And I know that once I questioned my family, or the things and the things that weren't spoken about, the silent secrets, all the different things from the generational traumas, when I questioned it, that's when a little bit of the Tetris, the blocks started to fall. And then I felt, and then you feel the emptiness of things, you feel the loneliness of things. But then, as you said, it returns, you return back to the place of dealing with yourself and not learning to love yourself. And I think if the message in some capacities is that when we go on that path, and when we are on the process of cracking our own code, we're then find self-love. And then each person, as you said before, you can't convince people. It's almost their own personal journey to do that. You know, initially when all this stuff was going on, I wanted to post this, post that, tell this, tell that. And then I said to myself, wow, it's like I'm like trying to convince people who are not even interested. It has no clue. They have no interest. So your work itself is so filled with knowledge of all your experiences, and it's so difficult probably to express all the things you know in one little sitting, and to be believed and to be heard. But of course, there's a community that listens to this information that obviously finds this to be a truth and to be motivated by it. You've developed the interest in astrology, and how did that come about, and how does it help you in your life, and how does it help your clients out?
Yeah, I just learned it along the way. Just have always been looking into that sort of information. In high school, I did the I Ching all the time. I was doing, working with cards. And I know like some people frown upon this kind of stuff because of religious programming. And but the whole key is self-knowledge. We need to know ourselves. And why would we want to demonize the influence that the planets have on us? We know that the sun influences us, the moon influences tides. I mean, we're influenced by the planets. They're not just hanging there for no reason. I mean, we've experienced things on a much more galactic level. We have genetics and DNA that we haven't switched on yet. And so the study of medical astrology really did it for me, because it really like makes it less about what's outside of us and we're just being influenced by this stuff. I mean, it's a co-creation, right? There's different levels of the planetary energies. There's the shadow side and then there's the higher octaves. So, when we recognize the influence of the planets on us and the associated organs, and some of the difficult aspects in a chart and how that can impact somebody's health, it gets very easy to read a chart and be like, okay, do you have this kind of issue? Do you have like thyroid issues? Do you have blocked throat chakra? Are you working on healing your throat chakra? Do you have allergies? It's just, you get so used to it once you study it enough to just really know, right? Because there's 12 houses and there's 12 strands of DNA. We're all born with a map. And when we sunk down into this lower harmonic universe and the planetary grid network was set up before it got the overlays, the whole idea was to be able to share our codes and different strands in order to rebuild the template of the tree of life. And when it went into like, if you look at it metaphorically, the tree of knowledge and that duality, we've been learning from that duality, but it's been targeted with mind control, because the natural progression of nature is to know how to heal itself. It's ingrained in us. It's encoded in us to seek equilibrium and know how to heal ourselves. We see it in nature and the cycles of nature we're all connected to. So an inverted system would separate us from that, confuse us, indoctrinate us, and take us away from that. So the astrology helps us to not be in autopilot. It helps us to see, are you running an ancestral pattern? Are you in a program? How is your Saturn and moon? Because there's a Saturn moon matrix, the imbalance of the masculine and feminine. How is that impacting you? Has it gotten to your health? Is it affecting your relationships? And then you see the outer planets, which are initiatory, Uranus, Pluto, and Neptune. They help us go through the growth periods that help us to break through, connect with our truth, go through the transformation cycles. But if we have a difficult relationship with it, we tend to freak out when those growth periods happen, and we run to the doctor, and the doctor's like, oh, you have depression or anxiety, or you have anger issues, without appreciating that soul's probably having a very healthy response to the BS that one is seeing around them. But
Right.
it's just masked with these projections. And this is a part of, the inverted system. But if you can help a person realign with it and trust it a little bit more and allow oneself to move through these things, release the grief, not condemn these parts of yourself, but get to know yourself more in the face of these physical symptoms, you'll begin to unlock, who you truly are, what your calling is, and, your authentic expression. And so seeing all that data is really helpful. Like if doctors used it, I think it'd be a lot easier to help people. Um, yeah, so some people misuse it just like anything. I'm not so much into the predictive aspect of it, but just in pointing out the patternings and helping a person see their greater potential so that they're not just looping in one area of their chart when all of this other amazing stuff exists. And every single person has access to these ascension energies, but some people just get stuck. So when a person's willing to look at that, they have incredible breakthroughs and on every level. So it's not just health. On the physical level, of course, it's spiritual health, mental health, emotional health, and um, all of that, because we're earth, air, fire, water. Every zodiac sign is connected to an element. The nucleic acids of our DNA are elemental. The fifth element, being ether, is connected to our mitochondrial DNA. And now that the sun moves through Ophiuchus, which it's in right now, which is the 13th sign, that is the mother energy and it being anchored back on the planet, which brings in the ether element, the fifth element, the quintessence, connected to the mother and the Holy Spirit. Look how targeted it's been. Mask yourself. Don't breathe. Don't stand, because this is the balancing. This is because the Baphomet and Dark Mother reversals is the satanic way
Yeah,
to
yeah.
mess with the planetary grids, to break up that template and scramble our fire codes, or and mess with the planetary grids where the masculine and feminine are connected. And so it's created this imbalance. And so it's all about rebalancing, not about the mother taking over, but about appreciating and noticing that energy is there, bringing in unconditional love. And the purification of the ether clears out toxicity, breaks down dark weapons, because it's the override frequency that begins to dismantle the dark weaponry, because it raises our consciousness and it pulls us more into the polarity integration than this imbalance that we're born into, that we pick up on from parents, from society, but also the planetary grids that have needed repair. So astrology is so helpful. It's unbelievable. I've been studying it for 20 something years and I learn more every day. And the nodes are very interesting. We're born with the south node. We integrate the north node. So it shows that on the soul level, we're born to integrate polarity. But if something's steering us off course, if we're in a groomed or indoctrinated ego, we're going to miss the deeper soul work, which takes us into 5D. People are like, what does 5D mean? It's really the soul matrix. It's when we're soul centered. And when we're soul centered, we live on a much deeper level. We're not just caught up in the world of appearances. We live on a much deeper level. We're more connected with nature. We're more abundant, not because of money so much, but because of the quality of life that we can live and the things that we can manifest coming from higher dimensional energies that hold a different physics than this duality down here, which relies on the paycheck, relies on the reward system. And so people freak out and go into survival when they don't need to. That could be a possible upgrade, more than likely, for you to really tap into a greater way to achieve abundance without having to have a dependency bond with an inverted system that you feel you can't live without. So this is the slow transition people are making. And it doesn't mean like money's bad. It just means that, we want to make sure that it's connected with our true value system, and that we don't compromise our spiritual path for the
Right.
sake of that, or for the sake of anything being thrown at us from outside, which infects our creative energy. So we actually enable the very agendas that we might feel or not even recognize that they're agendas. So we need to purify our creative channels from the things that infect it. Because when our mind believes in it, it manifests it. And that's the magician archetype of the throat chakra. So I always check that too in the chart, because they could have a brilliant chart, but if their mind is like over there, it's just
Right,
like, here,
right.
come back.
Interesting. And in terms of Pluto now, at the last time it was near the U.S. was in 1776, around the time of the Revolution. I mean, it's been hovering around this planet, and it has its implications for obviously dramatic change, revolution. Uh, I mean, do you see any type of specific shift? I know there's obviously we see the shift, but in terms of any type of astrological insight that you can give us of what
Yeah.
you think?
So, Pluto returns, Pluto moving into Aquarius. Pluto goes direct into Aquarius in January. And the whole concept of death has been very targeted. People fear death. The whole, like, I probably, oh, I don't want to get your channel flagged. The whole thing that happened 2019, 2020, as far as the plan stuff connected to, you know, everything that changed our world as we know it. Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto were all conjunct during that time. And then with Pluto returns and Pluto moving into Aquarius, a completely different sign, they wanted to leverage that period to create a lot of fear of death because it represented a growth period of transformation. So Pluto's sort of like a birth canal. It's sort of like the cocoon going from caterpillar to butterfly. It changes it changes a person. It strips away what doesn't serve one, and they rebirth, and they are more soul-centered and more connected to their inner depths. You know, people go into a dark night of the soul, they do a lot of clearing, and they, you know, end up rising above. Like if they go through a dark night of the soul because of a breakup, because of a job loss, because of the death of a loved one, you know, you go into that period where it does feel really dark. You might get really depressed, you might be really emotional, but you're releasing and releasing, and then boom, once that's completed its course, then you're rising. Then it's like the phoenix rising, or you're emerging, right? Because Pluto is death, rebirth, alchemy, and transformation. If you're just focused on the fear of death, then you're not going to go through the birth canal. You're going to be trapped in it, and you're going to be trying to find anything outside of you to alleviate it. And this is what outer authority in the dark Saturn has leveraged, right? So talking about the different planetary energies and the different levels, the dark Saturn is tyranny and control. And when we are in the dark Saturn, unevolved Saturn, then we allow that tyranny and control to dictate to us what reality is, because it also rules time and like reality to a certain degree. But the true reality is the higher octave of Saturn, which is self-mastery and becoming a teacher, overcoming obstacles, and not allowing limitation and control to block you from being all that you could possibly be. So the Pluto Capricorn, you know, before moving into Aquarius, was very much clearing the Saturn energies for all of us to look at the deeper information that's very difficult for people, to not fear death, to embrace this transformation of consciousness, of awareness, of realizing where we've been duped, where we've been lied to, where Pluto is cleansing all that and helping us to let go of it, sort of like breaking up with the old paradigm, breaking up with a partner, you know. Then what we do is we, you know, transform, and we work with the law of structure and Saturn on a much stronger level, self-mastery, connecting with different disciplines and rules and responsibilities that are in harmony with our growth, that help us to thrive, right? So we might discard, you know, societal programs and rules and restrictions and move in a direction of like eating really well or getting good exercise, taking care of your body, because Saturn rules structure, the skeletal system, and teeth, and, you know, things that represent structure. So, you know, if our structure is not able to contain the multidimensional or the creative imagination, then, you know, it gets really difficult. So Saturn and Pisces ruled by Neptune, and Saturn having to do with more concrete reality, it's now integrating the spiritual realms, the multidimensional, the creative imagination. But this is where we also see a lot of wars going on, and a lot of battle between religions, or, you know, the chosen ones, or my God or your God. And that's the inversion of the dark Saturn wanting to infect our spiritual energies with the indoctrination of religion and the divide and conquer, right? So that's an unevolved Saturn manifesting in Pisces. But when we see Saturn, like in somebody's chart, conjunct Neptune, well aspected, that person's really bringing in the integration of dream time, the multidimensional, the creative imagination into the physical. And they can see that we create our reality. We can dream up and create and manifest things that we want to, like, manifest in the world. So that is being massively targeted. And so Pluto, sorry, I'm kind of going off course here. Pluto moving into Aquarius would be, okay, that's ruled by Uranus. That has to do with truth, authenticity, higher mind. The inversion of all that is to stunt the growth, cause the fear of death, and bring out these scientific solutions that might stunt our spiritual and soul growth. And that would be transhumanism, assimilating people more into the AI, convincing them these technologies are really good, or still having a lot of these dark technologies operating. And then when they, like, you know, come up with fake alien invasion or the use of these dark technologies, people are falling for it because they're not in the higher octave of Uranus, which takes us into the higher mind. The lower octave is the shock and upheaval, and then the panic and the anxiety, and then the giving your power away. So what they do is they weaponize these astrological events so that we stay on the shadow side, and it just streams through the media. And so instead of like letting go of that and turning off your devices and going through the natural upgrade and growth period that nature provides, people look outside of themselves and they're allowing something to control this process, and they're being duped and convinced, and so they're consenting because they think that that's the solution. That's the problem reaction solution. Most of what we've been dealing with has been the problem, and then we see them come in with the solution, and then people get hooked to that outer solution, when a lot of this is all about waking up, switching on dormant DNA, and trusting that the greater cosmic intelligence and our life is giving us everything we need to upgrade. But if we don't trust it, if we like fear it, if we panic, then everything outside of us is going to leverage that, and then that dependency bond with how it makes money off of us and uses us continues. And so the bifurcation is really happening because a lot of people are moving through that birth canal, and they are awakened, they are more soul-centered, they are, you know, living on a much deeper level, a lot more grounded with Mother Earth. But a lot are going through the birth canal, getting stuck, and then it's getting energetically corded into the vampiric matrix that is going to use their life force, depopulate some, and continue to vampire off them and create, you know, this new world order. So is that still going to exist? Is the whole world going to wake up? Well, those are the great questions. I just know that if you're on the trajectory, that whatever you witness outside of you, of those that aren't, are not going to mess with your path. You might witness it, you might go through some of it. As this bifurcation happens, there's going to be a bridge between the two splits. We're not just going to see it disappear. Some might, you know, lose their physical just to move on. Some might, you know, move off the grid, but we're still going to be witnessing it to a certain degree. And we can't let that trick us into thinking like, we're, you know, we're all doomed. I mean, regardless of what happens, as long as you're inwardly free, the physical will catch up with it. And, you know, we just have to be extra careful during these times because there is a lot of targeting going on. But does that kind of make sense?
Absolutely.
I don't know if that makes, okay.
You know, when you speak about this, it brings me to the time right now, specifically the holiday season, when, you know, families either get together or there's always conflict, or there are members in a family which, you know, people avoid or want to. It's a very hypocritical time. In other words, it's so easy to step out of your comfort zone and go to a party and be amongst people. And yet sometimes people need to be true to themselves and actually honor who they are and what they're feeling at the moment. And I think a lot of times when we go inward as opposed to going outward, and we remain true to our shadow aspects, the parts of ourselves that we don't want revealed, it gives us a better understanding of rising above the fire and seeing the things from a higher perspective, once we're able to do it within ourselves. Yesterday, I was sitting by the reservoir, and I said to myself, over this last year, I think I have a Saturn return, which is this particular year itself. And I'm definitely feeling those energies and those qualities. And I also have Pisces. Saturn, my Saturn's in Pisces, or Pisces is in
Oh, good.
Saturn.
With somebody like you, that's a good.
So
Yeah.
how does that impact me in terms of what's going on?
You'll be holding the higher level of it, right? So, you know, when these aspects are happening, that's usually how they, you know, create the psyops or just, you know, any kind of event, so that instead of a person feeling into it, they're like getting like the inverted version. So if it's in your chart, it's already very strong in you. You've already been working that energy. You've already probably seen controlling religion, witnessed to it, experienced it, and then you got over the hump and found your own spiritual truth, right? That's usually the trajectory of somebody with Saturn and Pisces. It usually starts off where Saturn is where we feel a lot of control and where we might submit to that control. And then when we overcome it, depending on the transits and other aspects of your chart, when the timing of that was, you know, you will have moved to the higher level and established something to keep you in the flow of your own spiritual discipline, to stay aligned. Maybe for some that's detoxing regularly. For others, it might be going camping, or for others, it might be just finding a great community. And, again, there's nothing wrong with religion, even if people stick with it. But Saturn and Pisces just tends to relate to Saturn. First starts off as outer authority. So if it's in Pisces, Pisces are very spiritual. They're very empathic. For you, it's probably like really taking seriously your mission, your role, how it impacts the collective, because it also connects to the collective. So someday I can do your chart and just let you know more about all that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
Yeah, see, I do the Akashic records. I read the Akashic records, so I do that type of work.
right. So you're a spiritual teacher, because that's the highest level, right? So Saturn and Pisces would put you in a mastery position after maybe experiencing other levels of it, maybe in your younger years, right? Because that's
Absolutely.
part of society. So that's really amazing. You do that. So that's a really good aspect. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So anyway,
Well, I was gonna move on to the question of psychic development, like, and how you are able to help people connect the major dots and guide people to higher earth energies in terms of the work that you do with that.
I think the astrology, helps. And I just definitely work a lot of energy. I was really never in my body growing up. And I found out, I was doing a lot of energy work on a multidimensional level. I think a lot of us do. Um, and it's been told by hypnotherapists and hypnoregression people and remote viewers that I go into my lab places where people have been abducted, and I pull them out. I don't know. It's
Oh,
just,
wow, wow.
that's what they say. And people go on their table and they go into a hypnoregression thing and they say that I came in and pulled them out. And more than one person has said that. I haven't been in any MK Ultra projects myself, but I was, targeted to go off planet, and it was a different sort of thing to be a permanent colonist. So I haven't been in that. So part of my mission has been to help pull people out. I do it in my waking life when I work with clients. I interview people, I hear their stories, I work with their chart. Psychic development, I think we all are psychic. It's just really important that we hold space for it. We develop it. It's sort of like a muscle. And if we don't work it, it'll atrophy, just like an athlete that might be injured and not go out and exercise anymore. It's like, okay, to me, it's almost like a muscle you have to work on and build. And, I was very sensitive and kind of psychic kind of kid. And I think most kids are, but we kind of lose touch with that along the way. And I just, because I was getting so much and so many downloads and I took it real seriously, Eisenhower's presidents realizing I'm in this family. It's like, okay, I'm kind of living a double life, and I have to take this seriously, because why was I born in this family? I'm very, different in a lot of ways. And I just gave myself that respect. So when I was projected upon, when I was told you have ADD, or when I was like laughed at or not taken seriously, I'm like, this just comes with the territory. Don't worry about it. And I think my guides and Eisenhower, like, just that's all part of the territory. Don't worry about that. So I just stayed close with it. And my background's in wilderness expedition leadership. So I spent so much time in the wilderness too. And when I was at that Clairvoyant Institute, we meditated every day. You work on clearing your chakras. You focus your energy in being up here. And once you do that consistently, and you're just visualizing your chakras being cleared out, and you have somebody sitting in front of you, you can, begin to see things. The reason I moved into astrology is because I wanted something a little bit more grounded, because if I'm a little bit off, if I've just dealt with a major target or like traumatic situation, I might not be seeing as clearly as I could. And even though I've gotten really good feedback, I just like the backup. I like to see what I see, but see it in the astrology, see it with the cards, and just be really thorough in that way. And helping people with their psychic development. Some are much more like destined to do that kind of work, and some
Right.
are much more like earth signs, and it might be too much for them, because when you're psychic, you're very sensitive. You might have empathic overload. You might see more than you can handle, and it might make it hard to function in the physical plane, right? So, I think we all have our positions and our strengths, and if we can just integrate it all together, we can all help switch each other on. Because if we have a lot of aspects in one part of our chart, not in another part of our chart, we tend to attract people that hold pieces that we don't. But a part of the divide and conquer is to judge other people that are different from us. And so we don't integrate it. We don't appreciate it. It's like we're all broken up into little cliques and different groups, when in actual fact, we're meant to help switch on the full 12-strand DNA by combining all this, and being open to all of it. But there's a lot of imposters, and there's a lot of people that misuse these abilities. But a very psychic chart would be somebody maybe with a Scorpio rising or Neptune in the first house, or a lot of planets in the 12th house or 8th house. And even 4th house. It's the water houses, right? Because it connects with psychicness and intuition. And Uranus as well. You know, there's major indicators. Like sometimes I look at a chart, I'm like, do you do like energy readings? Are you in the psychic realm? Do you read past lives? Do you connect with your ancestors? Do you talk to dead people? They're like, oh yeah, I do that for a living. I'm like, okay, I thought so.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, but I mean, like if one wants to develop it and it wasn't strong in your chart, you can absolutely develop it. It's just you would probably need to just work it a little bit more, put more attention on it than maybe somebody that's just born with it a lot more available.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, in terms of the doing the Akashic records, and in terms of what you said before early, in terms of ADD, in terms of being out of your body, right, in shamanism, the soul loss and aspects of parts of ourselves being outside of ourselves and being connected to up the other various different dimensions and retrieving information back. I know I've been I'm a sensitive myself, and I do pick up on the energies, and it becomes an overload. At this particular time, as you just said, like I'm writing a book about my childhood and the things that I went through, and like an autobiography, and connected to World War II, as a matter of fact, from my grandfather, who was a soldier in the Russian army.
Oh, I can interview you sometime, I hope.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been on coast to coast, and in terms of my past life, and where I was, and being tied with World War II, actually. And I had met people who remembered me during interviews. And so it was that was the chilling part. So when you speak about these things, and in terms of these energies and these openings that are maybe a pathway for people to at least be preloaded on, not that a person can't be psychic, a person can't be a shaman, but obviously there's maybe some type of pre-order that comes into doing this type of work.
Yeah, no, for a lot of people. Oh, sorry, keep going.
No, just go ahead.
Sometimes it, really develops for people over time too. I've noticed. I mean, it's definitely a mixed bag. I mean, when we look at a chart, I look at the polarities because we're here to integrate polarity. We all have a different north node, south node. South node is more familiar. And there's a lot of bleed through from previous lifetimes. Then we step into the north node and integrate that. If there's not a whole lot of planets around the north node, it can be a little bit difficult because it's out of your comfort zone, whereas the south node is a little more familiar. But if we know that, we can begin to develop that. If there's a lot of planets surrounding the north node, or if the north node is in the first house, it's a lot more immediate. So a person's going to tune into that greater work. If a person is born with Libra on their ascendant, that integration of polarity is already there because Aries is opposite Libra. So they already have a lot of that already that is well established. So that's always a good thing to look at, because the shaman energy or an energy healer tends to have planets in the 12th house and the 6th house. And when they begin to integrate that, or you find Neptune in the 6th house, which is the ruling planet of the 12th house, then the physiology, the physical lifestyle, the healing path, everything that's about Virgo, which is the 6th house, has to do with health and well-being, lifestyle, physiology, being on a healing path, self-improvement. But it also, like, its shadow side is like disease and hidden enemies, and it's pretty rough. But when it's integrated with the 12th house, you begin to shift your physiology. You begin to shift the way you work in the physical plane. You're not unconscious to the energies that are influencing your physical vessel, because a lot of people with disease just have unprocessed pain or trauma or imbalances that were passed down to them, maybe in their genetics, maybe there's a past life spillover. So when you begin to tap into the energy and the unconscious behind the physical, and you change that energy, then all of a sudden the physical changes, which are what shamans like really understand. And I know you do too. So a person, sometimes it takes years to develop it. They really need to be willing to maybe go off, work with a shaman. For a lot of people, plant medicine really helps to just get that like higher perspective. A lot of 12th house energies, people do plant medicine and like go off and retreat and just get to know themselves, like get to really tune into that. And those that have a lot of 6th house and not a lot of 12th house, tend to just have like chronic illness. They just haven't really tapped in. So it might take a transit like Pluto traveling through your 12th house to really like put that emphasis on that part of your chart. So if a person knows their chart more, they're going to be less distracted from those opportunities, because those opportunities are always there. It's just if you're like really hooked into the matrix, you're going to blow off those opportunities. And that's another reason why it's helpful to know. But yeah, I don't know where that question came in or if I went off on a tangent there,
No,
but
you did. You answered in terms of how to get to that place, or like you expressed it in terms of, where you chart, you're more prone to being a healer, or you're less prone, but you still can do it. I understand.
yeah, it's just you want to notice when those opportunities are, or you want to get out of your comfort zone, even if you don't have planets there, then find people that carry that really strong, because it'll help you to switch that on, because we're not bound to our chart. I feel like the chart's a map to get to the 0 point unified field, to get out of the patterning and the looping, that you
Right, right.
begin to step into the greater initiations of Uranus, Pluto, and Neptune, which really brings us into a much higher place, because it's sort of a map in the 3D to get home again, but get back to source, get back to ourselves. Because if we don't read it in that way, then we might just be making predictions or keeping people kind of, stuck, without like helping them to like see what's available and see where those opportunities are to begin to break through, really. Because I just feel it's like a portal to the next level in a way, to master some of these aspects.
Yeah. What's
But the Akashic record thing really helps with people's health. I mean, anything that just shines light on these parts of ourselves that are somewhat forgotten are just amazing. But anyway, keep going.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about your book. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's called Awakening the Truth Frequency, and it's a lot about all of this. Timelines, dark technologies, galactic history, what is really in us to be able to overcome this, a lot about my own life story, and a lot of the plutonic energies that, just going through a lot of, these dark, like, places and initiations, a lot about the mother energy, a lot about what I've uncovered about Eisenhower. So it's just like everything that covers so much of what I've, come to understand in my life. And yeah, just why this is an ascension window period, how that relates to the Venus transits and these corrections. Like if we like get hurt, whatever we're going through, we deep down know how to heal it. And this is what we're returning to. So the earth that got injured with cataclysms and exploded planets and things that happen in our galactic history and all these different galactic wars, the universal energies and the earth itself is correcting itself, it's healing itself. And that's how the mother energy dropped back in, the Venus transits, this particular window period. You know, and it just helps us to see that, what's happening in the repair work of the planet is happening within us. And as the planetary body is like healing and recovering from these cataclysmic events, and how the pyramid technology went offline and we lost our galactic memories, and like the Knights Templar, the Christ Templars and the Essenes got wiped out, and all these different things just, got lost to us. This is a major recovery that is encoded in us to be able to look forward to and embrace. And so anything else is just like trying to hook us in and what is the history of all that? And I talk about like Nephilim reversal grid, the Niberian diotic crystal grids, and how that's been placed in particular sites around the planet. And just as much as I possibly can put in the book to help people feel really reassured in these times, and to just encourage them to live their truth, because there's no greater truth than you being authentic and true to yourself. And in that's where unity consciousness comes in, because diversity in harmony is true oneness. And we need to appreciate, all these differences, no matter how we get, home to source. There should be no judgment or separation, as long as we don't get a negative ego about it, because that's really not the Christed way. And it's also about the different levels of our DNA and how that junk DNA actually connects to higher harmonic universes and alchemical marriage and hierogamic union, which was really the Christ-Sophia template. And why, that lifetime or that, became such a important thing. But then the Sophia energy got left out of the mix, and religion just became, it's like trying to fill in where we've kind of lost touch as best as I can.
I was going to ask you to leave us with an inspirational message, but maybe you just did in that end of it, unless you have something else
Uh,
you want to add.
well, I guess that's the inspiration. Is just we are the best news here, and really, discovering all that we are is the best thing that we can do, because it changes everything about what we experience on the outside. I mean, that's what happens when we clear traumas, or work on our traumas, work on ancestral patterns, work on deprogramming. The nature of our relationships changes, our health changes, our lifestyle is more compatible with our spiritual path, and the abundance that comes from that. It's just like, however challenging it is to begin to break through that stuff, embrace it, make it fun. It's like, and begin to really switch off everything from outside of you. If you're not in agreement with it, if it doesn't make you feel happy or good, if it's not something that you would want in your future, then make sure to clear that from your energy field and really focus on your dream and vision. Anchor it and ground it, make it a reality, speak it, write it, anchor it. And be willing to cut the cords with anything that undermines you or makes you feel less than, and know that there's so much to look forward to when you give yourself that love and respect. You're gonna find others that will just show that in return. And have discernment too. Don't be easily played. Work on your intuition, work on standing for your own truth, no matter what anybody thinks. Even if it's because of a trauma, you need to say no. Be gentle with yourself. Just make sure that you answer to you trust yourself. And you know it's very easy to be led astray. And yeah, there's so much to look forward to, and it's all encoded in the universal forces and the cosmic intelligence that we are encoded with. We're just unlocking it, and we're breathing life into it. It's all there. Every single one of us has it.
If somebody wants to reach out to you, could you just share your website, which I'll put in the description anyhow? But
Yes, it's cosmicguide.org, and I have a webinar at the end of January 26th, and it comes with doing mini readings if somebody wants a sample reading, and I talk about, astrology for 2024, a lot of the bigger initiations, a lot of the potential psyops, and yeah, so that's really worth checking out. So my website's cosmicguide.org, and thanks for having me, Adam, and I look forward to having you on my show.
yeah, absolutely. I appreciate your inspiration, your courage to break free from your own personal matrix that may have existed, but also to be a lighthouse for other people that can look upon your light. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.